Usually when we decide to make something, there is a purpose to that craft. Like making a gory skeleton to scare your neighbors on Halloween. And sometimes the desire to make is not brought on by necessity, but by the need to create something so utterly ridiculous that it turns you into a mad craft scientist. In December, I decided to turn my husband into a Christmas gnome, and oh my goodness, it was ridiculous. I laughed so much during the crafting process, especially while making this costume abomination. Now Fred is sporting this lovely looking beard, but to my dismay, I never showed you how to actually make it. So for your viewing pleasure, I give you the dwarven beard, a tutorial. This project is easier than it looks and requires a few simple supplies. You will need some yarn in the color of your choice. I used worsted weight yarn, and if you're looking at the numbers on your yarn that tells you the thickness of your yarn, it is a number 4. You can choose 1 or 2 colors of yarn, and you're only going to need 1 ball of yarn for this. If you want an alternate color to add some shading, get 2 different colors. You will also need a darning needle with a large eye. And by a large eye, I mean the hole that is in the needle at the top here, where you're going to stick your yarn through. You want that to be large enough so that your yarn will go through it. You also need some scissors and some lightweight fabric where you can see the thread lines. You want to be able to stitch through the fabric, so you don't want the weave to be too tight. I used some fabric I had left over from a Ray costume I made. I tried to find similar fabric at a fabric store, but I couldn't find the same sort of thing that I had used because I wanted to be able to tell you what it was that I used because I don't really know what it is. I did find some wholly athletic fabric that I thought I might be able to use, but when I got it home, it had too much stretch in the fabric, and I felt like that would be bad for our purpose. So you'll want some fabric that doesn't have a lot of give to it. This goes without saying, but I am obviously not an expert in fabric. We are going to take our fabric and cut it to fit the bottom half of your face. Basically where a beard would grow if you had one. I roughly measured the fabric on my face and marked the width. You'll want it to go from here, right in front of your ear where your TMJ joint is, your temporal mandibular joint, which you can feel when you open up your mouth. You'll feel it moving. From there to the other side. So that's sort of, you want it to come across and go to those 2 points. Once I marked my fabric, I trimmed it to size. I held it up to my face again and marked where the bottom of my chin was, and then roughly drew a face shape onto my fabric. If your face was off and laid flat on some fabric, I cut that piece out and left some pieces on the sides where we will attach an elastic later on. So I sort of squared it off on the sides at the edges here where we'll be attaching an elastic. I also marked where my mouth was and cut out a hole for my mouth as well. Next, you'll want to measure a piece of yarn the length that you will want your beard to be. And I held the yarn up to my face and just sort of measured down how far I wanted it to be, and then measured how long that was. Mine was about 15 inches. Keep in mind you can always trim your beard later on, so it's better to be a bit too long than for it to end up being a little bit too short. Once you have your length, you're going to cut strands of yarn that are double that size. So my length was 15 inches, so I was cutting strands that were roughly 30 inches long. And I say roughly because you don't really have to be exact for this. Like I said, you're going to probably trim your beard later on. Then take your needle and fold a strand of yarn in half. At the folded end of the yarn, you're going to insert that through the eye of the needle, which is why you want a needle that has a large enough hole. Then pull the yarn through a little ways. This can be finicky and sometimes the yarn can split apart. If it does, just pull it back out again and try to make it as smooth as possible when you're inserting that through the needle hole. I find it helps if I pinch it between my thumb and my forefinger so that it's a smaller size, and then work my needle down over top of that. And then once I have a little bit through, I can pull it through the rest of the way. Then stick your needle through the fabric from the front, past a few weaves, and back out the front again. Then pull the yarn through a little bit. Then we're going to pull the needle off the yarn, which is why I threaded it the way I did. Now you have a loop of yarn pulled through the fabric. You're going to take the other end of the yarn and pull it through the loop, locking the yarn in place. You just tighten it down afterwards. Hooray! We have our first whisker. Now continue attaching pieces of yarn to the fabric like this until your fabric is covered with beard hairs. You can attach another shade here and there to create some variation to your beard. The gnome wig I made was the gnome wig. I guess it's a wig, it's a beard wig. The gnome beard that I made, it was just all white, but for this dwarven beard, I've pulled through some taupe yarn to add variation or highlights. As my husband pointed out to me when I was buying yarn for this project, his beard is different colors. So when I was just buying one color, he was insistent that I buy other shades for variation. And we did some beard matching to his beard a little bit. Once I reached the mouth hole, I noticed my fabric was starting to fray. So I stitched around the edge to help prevent that. In the beginning, I did try to do a zigzag stitch around the edge of the fabric because I knew it was going to fray like that. However, it wasn't really working out. I might have been able to make it work if I had more time to spend fiddling with it. I just didn't want to fiddle with it, so I just decided to use some yarn and stitch around the edge. You could do this to the whole thing if you want, and you could do it ahead of time if you want. This helps prevent the fraying and to cover up the fabric in that area. And then I continued on attaching yarn to the rest of the beard. I did about 3 rows above the mouth where the mustache area of the beard would be. I then measured a piece of elastic around my head and sewed that to the edges. You'll want the elastic to be a bit snug so the weight of the beard doesn't pull it off your head. Then I sewed around the top edge of the fabric the same way I did around the mouth to help hide the edge of the fabric. Then I also went back in and filled in any holes or areas around that top edge that looked a little bit sparse. Felt a bit like a perfectionist during this part, and sometimes that's a problem. We're working on it. I think it turned out pretty good though, so I'm not mad that I took that extra little time and was nitpicky about the little areas I could see at the top edge. Once that was done, I trimmed my beard to the size and shape I wanted. Then I braided the beard. You don't have to braid the beard if you don't want to. You could leave it the way it is. I might be using this for a future dwarven cosplay. I'm going to do a cosplay of my current D&D character, who is a dwarf barbarian. And in her matriarchal clan, the women at the top have beards. It's a status symbol, and she really wants a beard. Does not have one yet. Might have one day. So I thought this would be a fun project to do for that as well. And wanted it to have cool braids. I found this a little bit finicky, more finicky than I thought I would. I tried braiding the beard when it was laying flat, but I couldn't get the strands to fall where I wanted them to, and I tried braiding it when it was on my face, and I couldn't see what I was doing well enough, so I called in reinforcements. I had my husband Justin model the beard while I braided it, and I was happy he was happy to be a willing participant because I was beginning to struggle a little bit. Justin was also kind enough to loan me some of his beard beads that are a little bit too large for his current beard. To finish off the braids, I did end up just wrapping some yarn around them and tying them off instead of using an elastic or something, so they do kind of blend in pretty well. Finally, because I'm picky, I wrapped some yarn around the edge of the elastic where the elastic was attached to the fabric to help hide it a little bit. Next time I think I would choose a color of elastic that was similar to the beard or a different shade, but I was just using what I had on hand, so I ended up using white. I do wonder though if I could maybe not paint it, but go over with a brown Sharpie or something just to kind of help disguise it a little bit. I guess we'll see how much it shows up while I'm wearing it. I would imagine if you have a wig on over top as well, that it would kind of come down more and cover up where the elastic is. And this is my finished beard. I kind of love her. Yes? I think it turned out pretty well. Just need to fiddly where my mouth is. My mouth hole. And now you have an awesome beard for that dwarven cosplay that you've always wanted to make. Or just because you wanted to make something so ridiculous that it makes you laugh every time you think about it. Fill your cup up with the things that bring joy in your life. Just a little piece of crafting advice from me to you. And I like it. Now I understand why my husband touches his beard all the time. Like he just sits there and strokes it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you need to make horns or antlers for a costume or cosplay, one of these videos will help you out. The choice is yours. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye.